There's this prophecy in the Bible that is so amazing that Sir Isaac Newton, the guy that discovered gravity, he actually said that the entirety of Christianity can be based on this one prophecy. In other words, if Christianity is true, everything about it, everything about the Bible, everything about God, everything about Jesus, everything about Christ can be proven with just this one prophecy. The prophecy comes from Daniel chapter 9. Daniel was given a prophecy by God that said that it would be 70 weeks before all of history was complete. This would literally be the end of the world in 70 weeks. Now, that was over 2,600 years ago, so let's break down some of the math and see how this prophecy is actually accurate. It's Daniel chapter 9, and it's a prophecy that God gave Daniel about 70 periods of 7 years that would culminate all of history. In other words, there'd be 70 periods of 7 years each, and at the end of those 70 periods of 7 years, the world itself as we know it would come to an end. Now, simple math. 70 periods of 7 years means 70 times 7, that's 490. So 490 years. Now, again, that's 2,600 years ago this prophecy was given, so how does any of this make sense? Let me explain. First, God said that this prophecy would literally be broken down into 3 parts. So this 490-year period has 3 distinct parts to it. Each part, to me, is just as amazing as the next. In fact, I think Sir Isaac Newton was basing his entire statement on part 1 of this prophecy, not even considering part 2 and part 3. Because part 1 of this prophecy is a simple prophecy that said that from the time of the decree to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, that it would be 69 periods of 7 years. That's 483 years. It'll be 483 years from the decree to rebuild the temple until the coming of the Messiah and announcement of his arrival in Jerusalem. Now, here's where things get absolutely nuts, and I'm sure this is what Isaac Newton was referring to. We have historical, provable records that there was a Persian king by the name of Artaxerxes who in 445 BC made a decree, wrote it down, there's historical documentation to it, that the Jews were to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. When you take 445 BC and count out those 483 years from that exact day, it's actually 173,880 days to the exact day. When you take those 173,880 days and count from 445 BC, you land on the exact day that Jesus of Nazareth arrived in Jerusalem riding a donkey, like another prophecy in Zechariah had foretold he would. He arrived exactly on that day, and they laid the branches down for him, and they praised him and said, "Hosanna, Hosanna, glory to God in the highest. The Messiah has arrived." He, only Jesus, was there on that exact day and arrived in the exact way that the Bible said he would. I'm sure Sir Isaac Newton looked at that and said, this is absolutely nuts. The Bible said, God told Daniel in a prophecy 500 some years before Christ was even born, that it would be 173,880 days from this decree to rebuild the temple until Messiah arrives. And that's exactly the day that Jesus arrived in Jerusalem. We can prove this through historical records. So there's no one else ever that could ever be the Messiah. Only Jesus of Nazareth was there on that day to fulfill that prophecy. It's absolutely mind-blowing and amazing. Now, that's only part 1. Part 2 of the prophecy would be that there was going to be a pause, a gap, a stop to the countdown, right? Because if it was only 490 years until the end of the world, and 483 came and went, and here comes Jesus into Jerusalem, that should leave 1 period of 7 years. Well, what happened? That was 2,000 some years ago. The Bible makes it clear in that prophecy in Daniel chapter 9 that there would be a period of time between the 69th period and the 70th period. Now, as we can clearly see, that period of pause has lasted over 2,000 years. But it said that a lot of things would happen during that pause. Two of them in particular would be that Jesus would be crucified. Remember, the 483 years was till his arrival in Jerusalem. But after that, he was crucified. After that, he rose from the dead. After that, in fact, 50 some years later, the temple was destroyed again. And all of that was part of the prophecy in part 2, where there was going to be this pause, this stoppage of the countdown. And we know that there's a pause and a stoppage of the countdown because the final 7-year period begins with another specific event when the antichrist, the person who will be the world leading ruler of the final world ruling empire, will sign a peace treaty with the world for guess how many years? 7. When he does that, when you see a man who is the leader of a final world ruling empire come on the scene and sign a peace treaty with the world, you will see, especially Jerusalem. See, it's all centered around Israel. This peace treaty will include Israel. And as you see what's happening now in the news and everything that's surrounding Israel, it's a hot topic and it always will be till the end. In fact, Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars, and that will last all the way right up until the end. And that final 7-year period begins when a man comes and signs a treaty. He brokers a deal between Israel and the rest of the world. When that happens, there is only 7 years left according to God's timeline, according to God's calendar, and that is when Jesus himself will return to destroy the final world ruling empire and the Antichrist himself. It's time to get right with God now. No one knows when this period is going to start. No one knows when this time is going to come to an end. But we see that right now, Jerusalem is under siege. Israel is under siege, just like the Bible said it would be. There'd be no reason to broker a peace deal and this treaty with the world, and especially with Israel, if there wasn't conflict, if there wasn't fighting. And we're seeing that happening right now. So this can happen at any moment. Believe me when I tell you, you do have a role in it, and your role is important. So come back, stay tuned, subscribe and like this. We will bring you more information regarding your future and God's timeline. Be blessed.